No, the title's not clickbait. This really did happen, and in the moment it was quite scary and I could really feel that adrenaline kick in. Before we start, I do want to remind everyone that this video will go over some sensitive and serious topics, so viewer discretion is advised. But with that said, if you're still going to continue, then let's get started. Now in the background here, I try to draw what I kinda remember what the man looked like. The date of these events is the 21st of October 2025, and the story starts at around 4 PM. So I leave the school with my friends. School doesn't end at 4 PM for me. I just sometimes like to stay with my friends at the school library after school, and today was one of those days where, I stayed back after school. So we took the bus from the school to, one of those main stations where all of the trains and buses are interconnected, and there's a lot of bus routes and train routes. Since my friends either take another train or another bus, they aren't a part of the story, and I think, that's actually a good thing, and they don't have to experience this as well. Okay, so it was at the station where I first saw the man. Now keep in mind that at this point I had no idea that he had a gun at all, and I also didn't know for sure whether or not he was going to board my bus, right? Because the stop that I was at, there's a lot of buses that go through that same route, but they all go through in like different directions afterwards. So I'm just going to go through my notes and give you a description of what this guy was like. I remember he had like a slightly longer than stubble beard, like stubble but then a bit longer. And he was around 1.8 meters tall, so that's 5'11" for my US viewers. And all the stuff he owned was quite ragged and beaten up. So he had like a desaturated red colored jacket and construction work boots and this black bag, and which I later learned that he had a bottle of Jack Daniels inside it. Yeah. So from now on, let's call this guy Gunman. There were actually 2 police officers next to this guy, and while that might raise a lot of suspicions, it might ring a lot of alarm bells in your head, I actually didn't think too much about it. It wasn't that big of a deal, because usually you see these security officers helping old ladies who got lost in the public transport system, so like it's not like he was getting arrested in broad daylight or anything. And they were all laughing. I don't know what they were laughing about, but they were all laughing. Looking back, I think the police officers were just there to keep an eye out for him and like make sure he was in a good enough mental state to get on the bus and not cause any disruption, and also probably make sure that he didn't harm anyone. So the bus ends up coming at like 4:10 PM, and this guy low-key starts jumping and cheering and yelling and clapping his hands, and I figured maybe he was a neurodivergent. No, he was just drunk. He was drunk. So I get on the bus, and I guess the police just nodded heads with each other and both agreed that, yeah, he was fine to let go on the bus. He was not. Anyways, so at the end of all that, there was around 10 people on the bus, and the bus departed from the station. But he was actually behaving alright for the good first half of the ride. But they came to this point where, I don't know if the driver braked too suddenly. Well, the driver did brake suddenly, but I don't know if he was just that drunk or he was being over dramatic. But this guy, like, from his seat, he falls onto the floor, face first, and he's laying there comically straight, like he's a military soldier in like those like standing positions, but he's like flipped 90 degrees, so that's like literally him on the floor in front of the driver. For the first half of the ride, before Gunman started acting up, I had my headphones on, so I didn't really hear much dialogue until afterwards. But I remember after he fell on his face, the bus was just parked there on the side of the highway, like on the left lane, despite no one else wanting to go off the bus. And I remember Gunman telling the driver to just stop and keep going, keep driving, but the driver said that he wouldn't drive unless the guy on the floor stood up. I think at that point the bus driver realized that, he was just trolling. But seriously, he was laying there for like a solid minute and a half. Now after the driver talks back, Gunman gets real mad, so he stands up and he starts bashing the driver's cage of the bus driver. And despite all of this, the bus driver kind of just pretends nothing happens and just drives on. But this is where things get real heated, so he ends up pulling out the handgun and he points it in between the bars of the cage at the driver. And he was yelling really loudly, like, "Just f***ing drive." Now at this point, everyone in the bus was staring at him in shock. Now I want to give you guys some context about Australia. So stereotypically, we're kind of seen as like this country down under, upside down, and you know we have all these tough people fighting wild animals to get to work or school every day, and like we're all out in the outback and with wildlife and whatever. And yeah, thing is with guns, right? It's actually really hard to get your hands on guns here. It's illegal unless you have a license, and the process to get a license is also really hard, and you have to have a valid reason to own a gun. So for example, you live in a rural area and you might get attacked by wildlife, right? But otherwise, yeah. So surely this guy's gun's fake, right? And to be honest, I don't even know if it was a gun at all. But like, who holds a knife like this? But yeah, eventually he calms down and he sits down and he takes the bottle of Jack Daniels out of his bag and starts drinking it. So eventually we get to the stop that I'm meant to get off at. And there's a bunch of people that get off at the same stop as me, including Gunman apparently. And looking back, I'm like, wait, this guy deadass lives in the same neighborhood as me? But anyways, so the bus comes to a stop at the stop that I'm gonna get off, and Gunman bashes the driver's cage again, and he's like yelling, "Don't brake like that!" Even though this time the driver didn't even brake that suddenly because we were in a residential road. Anyways, so there's a girl in front of me, and as soon as she gets off the bus, she literally just starts running the other way. Like, okay. And then I get off as well, but what I didn't realize was Gunman kicked the front door while I was opening and got off at the same stop as me. And he starts heading towards the same direction as me as well. And I'm like, yeah, this is it, I'm about to get slimed. So I kind of just act nonchalant and walk forward, minding my own business, looking at my phone. And he walks past me mumbling some stuff to himself. So after he's at an earshot, I walk up to this other person who was right behind the driver's cabin, and yeah, he was super nonchalant. So anyways, I asked him, "You're right?" Because he was right next to Gunman, right? And he was like, "Yeah, what even happened?" Huh? What do you mean, what even happened? If you shot the driver, then you were next, man. But he had his AirPods and noise cancelling and everything, and he was just scrolling his phone while he was walking away. Now, in his defense, the driver's cabin does block a lot of the view, so he probably only heard some like yelling out of his AirPods and didn't really see anything. So yeah, I guess ignorance is bliss. And that was pretty much it. I started going home thinking, how do I even get out of that situation unscathed? Like, is this what you guys in America experience? Like twice a month? Like what? Honestly, just thinking about it, that junkie doesn't deserve as cool as a nickname as Gunman. Gunman is such a cool nickname. That's about it though. If you like this video, please like, subscribe and comment for the algorithm. Yeah, you can give me comments on what other nickname we should give this guy instead of Gunman. And also congratulate me on surviving this.